a place that they can call home as well, which means we at some point we've got to have dollars appropriated for the organizations that help those who live in the streets of life, the homeless. We've got to help them too. If we can help those in the suites, we can help those in the streets. I would also say to my colleagues, please understand, people who are here and undocumented have needs too. They live in places that are horrible. I've been in their homes. I have smelled the mold. I know what it's like to see the conditions that they dwell in. It is time for us to put aside the politics that divide us from people who need help and help those people too. Let's send some more people more money to the organizations that help them. This is a moment in time. This is a seminal moment in time. And it's time for us to step up and help everyone that's harmed, not be selective. If you are in this country and you're hurting, we ought to help you. God bless you. I thank you, Madam Leader, on my side, the ranking member. I thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and I beg that we do what we can to make sure every person in this country receives the help he or she deserves. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from New York reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the representative from Texas, Judge Poe.
The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey for yielding time. Mr. Speaker, my Houston area has suffered a historic hurricane, one that really changes and has changed the lives of all the people that were affected. My district was hammered by this flood. To put it in perspective, 27 trillion gallons of rain fell over Texas and parts of Louisiana in the 6 days of the flood. That's enough water to fill the Houston Astrodome 86,000 times. At the height of the flood, 70% of Harris County, which is the Houston area, was flooded. 70% was underwater. The devastation in Texas equaled, Mr. Chairman, the size of New Jersey. You place New Jersey at southeast Texas, that's how much of the area was affected by this flood and the rain. People had anywhere between 36 and 52 inches of rain. The Weather Service had to create a new color, purple, on their maps to show how much rain had fallen. Nothing like this has ever happened in North America. 72,000 people were rescued by first responders and volunteers from high water. This is the largest civilian water evacuations since Dunkirk. Thousands of civilian volunteers worked along with city and county first responders to save countless lives. The heroes came from all walks of life, from all parts of the country. The attitude of the people of Texas was one of inspiration. Flooded victims who didn't know each other, their homes are flooded, but they're helping other flooded victims get to safety and get what property they could recover. This heroism reminded me what it means to be a Texan and an American. Mr. Speaker, Harvey will not defeat the human spirit. There were two men in Brownwood. Now, you know where Brownwood, Texas is. Probably nobody else ever heard of it. That's in way West Texas. They decided they wanted to help. They got in their pickup trucks. They drove to Austin, Texas, which is still 200 miles away from Houston. They went to a sports place there and bought a bass boat, a trailer, a motor, filled it up with all kinds of stuff, drove to Texas, drove to Houston, Texas, and kept working for others. That's one of many stories. So this supplemental is important to Southeast Texas. Let this vote show that we will vote not for politics, but for people. And that's just the way it is. I'll yield back.
I reserve the balance of my time. Great job.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentlelady is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to yield 2 minutes to the very distinguished ranking member from California of the Homeland Security Subcommittee of Appropriations, Ms. Lucille Roybal-Allers.
The gentlelady from California is now recognized.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, There is no question that this supplemental funding is needed and needed quickly. When the response to Harvey began in late August, the major disaster account of the Disaster Relief Fund had approximately $2 billion available. The response to this catastrophe, however, is costing close to $200 million per day. This means that despite the recent $1 billion increase into this account, FEMA could run out of money at any time. Therefore, the enactment of the additional $7.4 billion for the Disaster Relief Fund in this supplemental is critical to help meet FEMA's immediate operational needs for Hurricane Harvey and to allow for the resumption of recovery payments for prior disasters such as Sandy. The supplemental would also provide a small reserve to ensure that FEMA can begin responding to Hurricane Irma or any other new disaster that occurs between now and September 30th, 2017. It is important to note, however, that if there is significant damage from Irma, FEMA will quickly need either an additional reprogramming of money, a second supplemental appropriation, or both. I want to applaud the majority for quickly bringing this supplemental package to the floor with emergency designations. And I now yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from New Jersey reserves, or New York, excuse me. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm here today to ask my colleagues to support funding for Hurricane Harvey disaster relief. Often the TV news goes around taking their cameras searching for the worst damage to create the most dramatic story. In the case of Hurricane Harvey, in the district I represent, you could drop a camera almost anywhere in towns like Rockport, Port Aransas, Aransas Pass, Ingleside, Refugio, Tivoli, Port Lavaca, and Victoria, and have that dramatic, heart-wrenching shot of devastation. My friends and neighbors' homes were completely flattened by hurricane winds. Businesses were destroyed, and much of towns were underwater, like in Wharton, following the unprecedented flooding left behind by this storm. It's the worst we've seen in decades. Many people, including the town mayor of Port Aransas, suffered and lost everything. He was walking around the Emergency Operations Center when the mayor of Corpus Christi went up to him saying, I'm jealous you get to work in shorts, so why in shirt and flip-flops? And the Port Aransas mayor looked at him and said, it's all I have left. You know, the good news for our communities is that we came together during this disaster. Groups from around the state and around the country donated to help, and many assisted the rescue and cleanup and came down and cooked food for evacuees and survivors. People opened their homes and their hearts to strangers, but the victims of the storms also need FEMA's help as well, with things such as emergency assistance and housing. Our cities and counties need help clearing brush and debris, and we'll need to make major infrastructure repairs to areas decimated by Harvey. With people registering for assistance at record rates using their smartphones, going to disasterassistance.gov, or using the FEMA app, FEMA will be out of money in just 2 or 3 days if we don't pass this. I urge my colleagues to open their hearts, the way so many Americans have, and pass this bill. And I want to say a special thank you to those who donated, those who came and volunteered, and to everybody who helped out. We're not only Texas strong, we're America strong. I yield back.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves.
Good job.
Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett, who understands the impact of a disaster of this kind, not only in her district, but in other areas where there been so much suffering. Ms. Plaskett.
The gentlelady from the Virgin Islands is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for the time. Mr. Speaker, at the end of this summer, the people in the Virgin Islands in every place of worship say the hurricane prayer at the end of their service. And part of that prayer says at the end, "But Lord, if a hurricane should come and you loosen the gale and the winds open on us, your will be done." Right now, the people of the Virgin Islands, the people of Puerto Rico are fervently saying that prayer because God's will is being done on those islands as Hurricane Irma is impacting and crashing against the shores of St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, and Water Island. This $7.8 billion in emergency supplemental funds is a crucial initial installment to address the effects of not only Hurricane Harvey, but the effect expected in my district of the Virgin Islands today as we stand in the potentially catastrophic path of Hurricane Irma, which is currently, at worst case scenario, a Category 5 hurricane, the worst hurricane in the Atlantic's history. This will need assistance from FEMA to perform emergency protective measures, the removal of debris, activities performed by other federal agencies as assigned by FEMA, and to aid small businesses and homeowners in rebuilding their lives. Right now, the people of the Virgin Islands are praying for the lives of themselves, their families, and especially for the roof over their head. This funding for initial response efforts is critical, and I thank my colleagues for the expeditious manner in which this legislation was brought to us for swift passage. I urge my colleagues to approve this much-needed lifeline, and we are covetous for your prayers right now. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield a minute to my colleague from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, and thank him for his assistance many years ago addressing the needs of the residents of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut during Superstorm Sandy.
The
Mr.
gentleman
Lance.
from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of this measure to allocate critical funds to urgent rescue and recovery operations currently underway in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. The destruction of Hurricane Harvey is horrific, and the loss of life is heartbreaking. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is helping to lead the disaster response. FEMA needs immediate resources from Congress. Natural disasters can strike any part of the nation at any time. No state is immune from the forces of nature, and states and localities should never have to question if aid is on the way. Our excellent federal officials have the resources and experience to mitigate harm. They need to continue putting that experience to use, helping our neighbors in need protect critical infrastructure, contain hazardous sites, and save lives. I thank Chairman Frelinghuysen for his leadership in assembling this immediate assistance for those in need. I urge a yes vote.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, the chairman of the Democratic Caucus, Mr. Crowley.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, gentlelady, for yielding me this time. I look at the pictures of Houston and Galveston and parts of Texas and Louisiana and elsewhere and harken back to the same images I saw in New Jersey and New York and throughout New England and other parts of the Northeast after Sandy. And I want to also note that the NYPD, the FDNY, were amongst the first responders to head down to Texas to help our fellow Americans in a time of crisis and need. I also would like to point out, I have no clue where the town is that the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, mentioned, and I may never ever go there. I may never go to that town. But I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, I don't need to go to that town to help those people. They are Americans, and I will help them at any opportunity I get when they have a storm like this that hits them. I don't ask questions. I never asked you if you knew where Edgewater in the Bronx was. I was prepared to vote immediately to help my constituents on Sandy. I wasn't going to have to wait till next week, or 30 days from now, or 60 days from now, or 90 days from now. And I think it's important we have to point out the hypocrisy. It's not going to stop this funding from going through. We need to point it out that 20 members of the Republican caucus from Texas, but one, Mr. Culberson, voted against Sandy relief. It must be understood that we are all Americans, and I will stand to help every American who is in need of help. Will the gentleman yield me 30 seconds?
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman is not recognized. The gentlelady from New Jersey, New York reserves, and the gentleman
I reserve
from New Jersey
the balance of my time.
reserves. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Who's next? Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding to me, and I want to pick up where Mr. Crowley left off. I'm for this aid. I'm for this aid 100%. We should help these people. As Americans, we should help people all over our country. But it really hurts that those of us in New York and New Jersey, when Superstorm Sandy came and we were begging for help, we had to wait 2 months for help, and our friends in Texas on the Republican side of the aisle, except for one, voted against aid for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And now they're asking aid for Texas, which I support. But it just goes to show we never know where these disasters are going to fall. And all of us are incumbent to support our fellow Americans no matter where they are. So I say to the people of Texas, my heart goes out for you. My vote will be there. As much money as you need, you'll have. But I want to just say to my Republican friends from Texas, what you did to us during Superstorm Sandy should not stand, should not be done to any other people, any place in the country. We're one country. We're Americans. We need to help those that need help. I'm for this 100%, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back his time. Gentlelady from New York reserves her time. Gentleman from New Jersey.
I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserved. New York.
Mr. Speaker, with the 1 minute remaining, I am very pleased to yield to the gentlelady from Texas who's been right there helping, reaching out to all those families who are in desperate need, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, is recognized for 1 minute.
To the distinguished gentlelady, I come now to just stand on behalf of our delegation to be able to say, as I said earlier, I acknowledge the pain of Sandy, but I now come to make sure that we all understand this first crunch is only the beginning. We're going to put in legislation that asks for $180 billion, recognizing the hard work of appropriators, but letting you know that people's lives, as we walk through the debris, this is in front of every house. It is painful. It is long-lasting. And so I just wanted to come to add my thanks, but to say, will you please stand with me for the long journey that is going to be needed for the infrastructure we build, new dams that are 30 years old, and housing issues that will not end today, in the massive eviction of people in apartments. Not cruelly, I hope, but they're getting eviction notices with no place to go. And so I ask that we as Americans join for the long haul, the long destiny, with prayers for all. Thank you, Madam Lowy, for yielding to me.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady will suspend.
Thank you very much. God bless America. I yield back.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey has the only remaining time, and he has 2.5.
Well, I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
First of all, this morning we salute the courage of all Texans and people from Louisiana. And we salute their courage and their resilience. And once again, I want to thank all of our federal agencies, obviously, the governor of Texas, the governor of Louisiana, and all those agencies that have been meeting the needs of the people. And again, the thousands of volunteers who immediately responded and who have been working tirelessly day in and day out to help hundreds of thousands of people affected by this storm and save, I may say, countless lives. They have fed and housed the displaced, met critical medical needs, provided transportation, and most importantly, gave faith to those who have lost literally everything. These are American heroes that are showing the best side of our nation, and we're grateful for their service. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Let's get the money out of the door and help the people of Texas and Louisiana, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back his time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the resolution be now adopted, and I request the ayes and the nays.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 502? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Roll call, please, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman asked for the yeas and nays.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise, stand, and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Title of the bill.
Number 212, H.R. 3388, a bill to provide for information on highly automated driving systems to be made available to prospective buyers.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, and the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on the bill.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the gentleman from Oregon, and I'd like to thank him for all the work he's done on this bill. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman very much.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who put enormous work into that, and all the members of the committee, and especially Mr. Latta for his great leadership, because today marks a really important milestone in the pursuit to make our roadways safer and support American leadership in self-driving innovation. So the Self-Drive Act, H.R. 3388, something we can all support. Simply put, the rapidly advancing technology behind highly autonomous vehicles is stunning. I speak from some experience because a few months ago I got the opportunity to ride in a self-driving car with engineers and experienced a vehicle perform without any need for human intervention. And though we can look to a future that fulfills the promise of these innovations, we cannot ignore the current troubling trend in the number of lives that are lost on our roadways in America. Given the latest roadway fatality numbers, this technology is especially needed today. Almost 40,000 people lost their lives on our roads last year. That represents another yearly increase